Hey guys, this is Blake Helfman. I'm here with Josh Merwin, River Oaks Chrysler Jeep Dodge and Ram. We are super excited about the partnership that Josh and I have put together. Houston International Sports Film Festival, River Oaks Chrysler Jeep Dodge is a premier sponsor. We're going to be offering discounts on cars. We're going to be giving away sports memorabilia, and we are so excited to partner with them. Tell us a little bit about the Sports Film Festival, Josh.
Yeah, so it's a one-of-a-kind sports film festival in Houston, June 3rd through 6th of 2021. We're not only going to have sports films that relate to life, we're going to have sports activities for kids to get them outside again. Also, I'm really excited to be partnering with them because my first car that I bought was a Jeep Wrangler right at this dealership. Come get a Jeep Wrangler for yourself.
Guys, we got the website below. Swipe up, swipe up, swipe up. Register right now for all the updates. It'll be coming up before you know it. Swipe up right now, and that website, Josh, is?
HISFF.org for Houston International Sports Film Festival.org.
Awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Thanks. Going to tell me what Black History Month means to you, and how you've, growing up, what you were taught about it.
Black History Month for me has always been an important time. It's a beautiful time that, some people can get caught up on the small details of, oh, well, why is it the shortest month, and why is it this, and why is it that? But when you think about it,
it's the shortest month.
It is the shortest month.
That's interesting.
It's February. So you can get caught up on those small things, but it's also 28 and every 4 years we get that extra day of 29 days of I think of it as a celebration month. It's not just a history of, oh, this is what the bad has been. It's a time where we get to celebrate, love on, and remember people who really made a difference, not only in this country, but in this world. Like when I grew up, you heard the same people. You every Black History Month is Martin Luther King, and I love MLK, like what he stood for. We're part of the same fraternity, and so it's deep roots. But every year now, especially with social media, you get new nuggets that you never knew about.
Yeah.
When I saw a video the other day that said, in 30 seconds or less, I'll give you 13 reasons why you should love Black history. And it was talking about the inventions of this thing and that thing and this thing. And they're all about Black people, like the stoplight. Like I think I didn't learn about the stoplight until maybe, ninth or 10th grade. But not to take
Plus
any
the
of
stoplight,
the
it's the mailbox, like Dr. George Grant
security system.
Yeah.
The home security system.
Grant invented the wooden golf tee, which I think is the most interesting invention because you've got a Black man inventing a golf tee, and then Blacks were not allowed to play golf at most clubs.
Absolutely.
After that, and it's a very interesting dynamic.
Last year for Juneteenth, just like I was just referring to before we started talking, is last year for Juneteenth, a lot of people had never heard of Juneteenth or they had heard of it but didn't know the real history of it. But one thing that I learned during Juneteenth last year was that hockey was actually, it was either created or in the first league of hockey in Canada was Black guys.
Really?
It's like, if you look around hockey now, this is not a white sport.
Yeah.
Like you're saying about golf, it's like the golf tee. It's like you don't have a lot of them. So it's, to me, Black History Month is a time for us to learn something new every single year, but also Black history is American history. Like we try to run away from the real history of America when America's history is what it is. Like if someone calls it out, that's just a fact. Like it's not always, well, slavery was this amount of years ago. Like we're only 50 something, 60 years away from removed from the civil rights era.
Yeah. Well, I mean, similar with the Holocaust. I mean, it's
absolutely. You still have survivors from the Holocaust.
Right. I mean, unfortunately, the next 5 or 10 years, we're not going to have any really.
Absolutely.
But it's about teaching, what happened. I mean, that's one of the interesting things with with the festival, like I found a film called Adidas vs. Puma on Amazon Prime that is about two brothers that started the first athletic shoe company, which before the war in 1936, it was before the war and before the Olympics. And Jesse Owens ended up wearing a pair of their shoes during the Olympics and winning those gold medals. And then those two brothers had a fight. There's a lot of dynamics in there, but they ended up splitting, and one brother started Adidas and the other one started Puma. And there's this really amazing film. It's beautifully shot. It's in German with English subtitles. It really kind of not just tells their story, but tells the story of what it was like to be a citizen in Germany, before the war and then during the war, and kind of all the intricacies of what a normal citizen had to deal with, whether you had to, you could stand on the side and not join the Nazi party, or some people were forced into it. I mean, obviously some people, really not good people, and they did it by their choosing. But there's intricacies in the history, and if you can teach it honestly, then it helps it to not happen again. But you just need to teach to inform people.
Right. And, it's interesting that you say that, because, when last year really amplified and multiplied the amount of history that people didn't know.
Yeah.
There's a channel called Vox, VOX, and they did like a series of videos, and they've always done videos and little snippet pieces here and there. But there's a video about how the Confederate, the wives of the Confederate, or sons of the Confederate, or something, like how the Confederate statues were created and when they were created. They weren't created during the Civil War. They're created like late 1800s, early 1900s by this group who, these old men were starting to die off, and we're in Jim Crow era and all of these different things. But how the creation of that group actually influenced the history books as well. Like, these are the same people who were writing the history books for.
So they amplified their ancestors.
They amplified, right? They amplified the falseness of American history, because they were writing the history books. And we're still, I mean, like I said, we're 60 some odd years away from removed from the civil rights era, but also segregation. Like, there's a story to get into UT history. 1970 was the last championship team that was all white, or 1969, 69. And 70 was the first integrated team, because that's when Julius Whittier was on the team and all that. And
you're talking about football?
Just football.
Well, yeah.
Football. Okay. And 2 years ago, Texas, commemorated the 50-year anniversary of the 1969 championship team. And last February, I'm taking a group of students to Longhorn Network, and one of them pointed out, he was like, last year we had to wear these jerseys and we didn't like it, because that was commemorating the last time that people that looked like me could not wear this uniform. And 50 years later, we're wearing that to commemorate people who didn't even want us to play. And it really shocked me, because I was like, I, being on the staff for this department, didn't even think once about that. And I'm Black. One, because I wasn't in the decision making to even think about that. But those guys felt a certain type of way and either weren't heard or didn't feel the confidence to step up and say, you know what, like, we don't want to wear these jerseys, but that's the difference in 50 years as well. It's like 50 years ago, like, players didn't have a voice.
Right.
If we're being honest, 10 years ago, players didn't have this amplified voice.
Yeah. Where very few of them had a voice that they would talk. And
very few.
Now they're getting more voice, even at the college level.
Right. The Muhammad Ali's and the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's, you know, those guys were few far and in between, you know, like for them. And even that history, a lot of people haven't, you know, when you think about like how Black history really like stretched out on the world stage, excuse me, people always think about the Olympics and the fist raising.
Yeah.
They never think about how Muhammad Ali was like, yeah, I'm not gonna fight. Or Jesse Owens is like, yeah, I don't want to go to this Olympics. Or I'm gonna go, you know, to prove this. Like those, you know, those are always suppressed, and it always has this mechanism of, yeah, well, we'll do the one that either seems the worst, where we recognize it, but in a ridicule kind of way, instead of saying like that took a lot of courage for one person to do that. You fast forward a bunch of years and you have Colin Kaepernick, someone who's willing to lose everything that he has for the right reason. And it took 5 years for people to recognize that he was on the right side of history. Now everyone, you know, you have the George Floyd killing and everyone wants to put out a statement. Oh, this is bad. He told you 5 years ago that this was a thing. The guy can't get a job in the NFL because of the system. So American system is the issue, is the foundation. It's like when you think about the founding fathers, it's like when the Constitution was written, Black people were considered 3/5 a human, not a whole human. And even though the language has now changed some 300 years later, it's still the same. Or Black people still feel the remnants of that 3/5 of a person. Like you could be a millionaire, a billionaire, a trillionaire and be Black, but you still, you know,
feel the suppression.
Less than. And so that's why I love Black history. Like I like that people, you know, get a chance to see the awesomeness it is to actually, you know, be a part of history. Like a lot of us, even today in 2021, a lot of us are still walking history. You know, I have a friend who was the first Black swimmer at UNC. She's younger than I am. You know, like
it's crazy.
That's crazy that you're friends with people who were first. And it still amazes me that in the 2000s, like you still have first, like this first Black CEO.
I mean, no, and this is why I think when people talk about systemic systems that are holding minorities down, is because, you know, I mean, you really, I guess, don't need a lot of money. It's not swimming, you have to have a pool, obviously. But I think a lot of it's just access to activities, right? Access to activities
that
Black kids don't have.
I had a friend, a fraternity brother of mine, asked a few weeks ago in a group we're in. He said, why aren't there more Black girls in lacrosse? I'm like, well, if you think about it, is how many have access to a lacrosse field? It's the same with soccer. It's the same with tennis. It's the same with golf. It's like those were, you know, those became rich people clubs, or, you know, people who had enough money to be able to afford club fees. Like even in youth sports now, it's like if you take baseball, for instance, like if you look at the NFL, like there are football fields everywhere, right? The youth fields. You look at basketball, every neighborhood you go in, you know, in the 90s and 2000s had a basketball court. You know, whether it was a homemade basketball court with a you know, with a milk crate, or you know, I grew up playing in the 90s with a bike rim as the basketball. Like that's how I learned how to play basketball, with a wooden backboard. But you had that. Baseball though. Baseball, like we've had the Willie Mays, we've had, you know, Barry Bonds, the Hank Aaron's, the Jackie Robinsons, you know, and people like love Jackie Robinson, but that's the only baseball player that, you know, people think is history. It's not. But when you think about baseball, is baseball in youth sport, baseball and softball in youth sports costs a lot of money.
Well, and the
And
divide's getting even greater because you've got the
it's
specialty,
getting
you've got the lessons that you have to get. I mean, the technology that they're using now, I mean, it's so far different from when I grew up.
right.
And even, I mean, year to year, now you've got, former Major League Baseball players that are opening all these academies, and, most kids don't have access to it because they're not opening it in the neighborhoods that minority kids live in, for the
Right.
most part.
And also on the other hand is, even if I grew up loving the sport of baseball, huge baseball fan, still love baseball. Um, Probably more college baseball now than major leagues. But um, when I transferred schools in 8th grade, they didn't even have a like my entire high school career, no baseball team
Where did you grow up again? I forgot.
in
Was it
Mississippi.
Mississippi? That's
In
okay.
Mississippi, yeah, right on the edge of the Delta. But we didn't have a baseball team, and that is. But you had football and basketball, so a lot of kids grow up maybe playing in those youth sports, but at a certain age, they realize that one, well, I'm going to stay on baseball for a second
Yeah.
because there's some different dynamics into why baseball is the way that it is. One is your chances are much greater at getting a football scholarship. Like there's 130 Division One football programs, and then there's another 200 or 300 other football teams. You can
Yeah.
get a football scholarship. It may not be where you want to go, but you can get one.
Yeah.
But are those full scholarships in those 200 or 300 other schools? Like you can get a full D1 scholarship, so you got 120 some chance. With baseball, they realized pretty early, 7th, 8th, maybe 9th grade, you see a lot of people tapping out of baseball
Yeah.
because those scholarships, you have 33, 34 players that can make a roster. You have 11.7 scholarships to split between those.
Yeah. Most of them aren't full scholarships, right? I don't think
Hardly
any of them
any.
are. Yeah. Even
So
even for the
you know what
top
I'm
top
saying?
player. Yeah.
Right. So if you can afford the club fees to travel ball,
Yeah.
and you can afford some of your tuition, you may have some guys, like we had guys when I was working with the team at Texas who weren't on scholarship at all. And these are some of our better players who didn't even have a 10 or 20 or 30% scholarship, but you have to split 33 guys up 11.7 times.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go choose football or basketball because those are full scholarships. And even though I may be the greatest thing at baseball, the highest amount of scholarship, like I'll never get 100% scholarship. Track is the same way. So when you look at track and baseball, where they have to split those scholarships, a lot of kids are transitioning out of those sports where, if I want to go to Texas and I can only get a 33% scholarship, that means I'm 67% on my own
Yeah.
because I can get the scholarship. I can get, I may be able to get a Pell Grant. But if I don't get another type of scholarship, then why would I do that? That's also why you have some kids who, if they get drafted out of high school, they could go in the 22nd round. If I can, sign a contract and get some money over getting a, 30, 40, maybe 50%
Yeah.
scholarship. So, a lot of people kick and scream about football and basketball players being able to make money. I think that before the NCAA does that, it would really benefit not only the NCAA institutions, but it would benefit Black youth sports and baseball if they change that number from 11 to 20.
Yeah. I mean, that was going to
Or
be my next question. You kind of went into it. What do we do to fix that? And I mean, you and I have talked for several months, but, what can the festival do kind of on a short term and, more importantly, long term basis on helping fix that? And what do you think the new NIL rules on players being able to make money. How do you think that's going to change the landscape?
Here's my take on the NIL. I think it's good for some people. It's still going to be the haves and the have-nots. If I'm the starting quarterback at a Division I Power 5 school, I can make money. But if I'm an offensive lineman, if I'm a cornerback or a linebacker who may be hidden by, something, or even if I'm the running back, if I'm not a Heisman Trophy winner, or a candidate, it's going to shift college athletics into a position where I don't, and there are going to be some student athletes in smaller sports who will be able to maximize on this because they can start a podcast, or they can start a brand, or they can, they can
I think
start
the Olympic
things.
athletes, it'll end up helping the most.
It could, but the issue is who's going to help them do this? Especially, if you're an athlete and you grew up around, some certain things, how to make money. Like sometimes it's just the NCAA rules are in the way that keep you from doing it.
When I was in college, it was like, Jeremy Bloom was playing football at CU at University of Colorado Boulder, and he couldn't get money from any skiing sponsorships, and so he couldn't pay his coach. So he had to, eventually leave football to focus on the Olympics.
Absolutely. And you have some Olympic swimmers who would be able to get their prize money from the Olympics, but they're collegiate athletes, so they have to eat a bunch of that money. I think the solution, I've always been on the side to where I think that in the case of an Olympic swimmer, if they win gold, they should be able to put that money in their pocket, whether it's in a trust, whether it's in a frozen account that can make money that you don't have access to it. But I've seen, gymnasts, swimmers, basketball players, when they go play for Team USA, like those kids can't get the money because there are rules in place. So it's going to help kids like that. But as far as the branding and the sponsorships and all that, is if I'm a company, would I want to go and sponsor, a third string kicker or a cornerback? Probably not. So, but also, am I sponsoring offensive linemen? Like, I want the guy that is the face of the program, which is oftentimes the quarterback. Maybe a running back, and sometimes you have a star wide receiver. My thing is, will it create chaos in the locker rooms where if I'm the starting quarterback and I'm able to get, an abundance of sponsorships and my face is on everything, it's like, but if I'm an offensive lineman and I'm blocking for you.
Just interesting dynamics on how that's going to.
Right. So there needs to be, I feel like there needs to be some parameters just to balance it out. The NCAA gets a lot of flack for having rules and, why can't we do this? Why can't we do this? It's supposed to, now, keyword is supposed to create a balance. It's supposed to be able to make it kind of equal for everyone, equal opportunity. Like your scholarship as a quarterback isn't any more than the offensive lineman, because you don't want to create that rift. Even down to the meals. I remember before they changed the rule a few years ago, the NCAA used to have a rule on how many meals the school could provide, like meals. So there was a snack mechanism, like ruling in there, where it says, you can provide 2 meals, but you can give them 2 snacks. And so we go on the road, and that would be, so we do dinner, and then after dinner, like a whole pizza would show up per kid, and it's like a snack. That's their snack. So that's their food that they could eat throughout, the night or in the morning if they didn't want, the breakfast or whatever. it's supposed to create a balance to where everyone is on the same playing field as it relates to what is provided.
Well, that's right.
Now,
That's the problem is they clearly weren't the way they were implemented was not doing that. And then also I would imagine too, you don't have the representation of many minorities running the NCAA. And that's where, again, it comes back to the systemic issues of, I think what a lot of people are talking about. And I think what a lot of, privileged white people don't understand, and why they'll push back against systemic, because they feel like they're not a part of it, but it's just ingrained in the system without even a lot of people without even realizing it.
right. And, it comes back to the word that you said earlier, access to things. And, if I'm a person that, like, we just went through the worst snowstorm of my lifetime last week. And some people didn't have access to heat, right? Or water, or a combination of both.
Yeah.
Or power. But there were some people who had access who said, come in, I have it. So, I'm not sitting over here with power and water and like, hey, good luck.
Yeah, right.
I have access to heating and power and water. You just got to make it on your own. And that's a representation of how America could be and how it is, because you still have some people who were probably in that situation of, hey, I got power and
I'm okay. I'm not,
I'm good as long as I'm good, like open your door up. So when it comes to access, it's like, people are afraid to lose what they have or what they have access to because they think that it's not going to benefit them as much as it is now. But as we go and we talk about Black history being American history, is if the access for Black Americans and minorities were greater, that increases what we can do.
Yeah, it lifts everybody up.
It lifts everyone up, because now if more people are thriving, then everyone is thriving.
Yeah.
Like if I create 30 businesses and someone else wants to start one, and I help them through my access to those businesses, that's going to benefit me and you, that person. But a lot of times we try to keep our hands around things because we're afraid. It's fear. It comes down to fear, because, if I let this person get in, then
there's less.
That's going to be less than I make. Yeah. Like, what does it hurt you to go from a trillionaire to a billionaire?
Yeah.
When you still got 99.9, $999 billion.
But it's like, like Bill Gates, the stuff that they're doing is amazing.
Right.
And it's, there are people that are, putting their money in the right places, and,
absolutely. And we don't really give the credit a lot of times to the people who are trying, because there are more people.
A lot of times they don't want the credit too. Right.
Absolutely. But there are more people who are doing wrong, and it's more of them that are barriers than people who are trying to knock down those barriers. But it's just like the news. It's like when I was in school and I took some journalism classes, I remember one of the first things that you learn is bad news sells.
Yeah. Well, we've seen that like in spades over the past 5 years.
You've seen it. It's bad news and messiness is what sells. It's
it's also what is news now.
Absolutely.
Like, there's no real clear definition on that, because it's, a lot of it's sensationalized, and a lot of it's, I want to say fake news, but it is. It's especially social media. It's like, it's not accurate.
Right.
And it's just,
and the reason behind that is a lot of it is rushed news is I got to be the first one to, to press send on this because I have to get credit. Instead of saying, okay, it's like, and I hate to use this example because it was one of the most horrific days in history for a lot of people mentally. I'll say that mentally is Kobe Bryant's death. Is so, there was a news outlet that I will not name, or fake news outlet, as people would probably go, that reported on his death, right? And you heard so many misinformation pieces about it. It's, I remember reading on Twitter, and it's like, Kobe and his whole family were there, and Kobe and his wife, and it was a lot of information just to get it out there. Like, you knew that it was his chopper, but you didn't know who was in there. So instead of, trying to rush to it and say, well, Kobe Bryant and his whole family were in there. What good did that do you by being first? Everybody thinks, I think Ricky Bobby kind of ruined this for everyone when he said, if you're not first, you're last.
Yeah.
But there's
got a Will Ferrell heightened awareness comedy quote. I like it.
I watched that movie enough that got me through 3 semesters of Spanish by watching that movie before every exam. But I think it's such a rush to be first and get it out there because you're going to be the source.
Yeah.
If Adrian Wojnarowski, I probably messed his whole name up. If Woj tweets something, or if he's the first one to say it, he's got the inside information.
Yeah.
But he's the source. If Adam Schefter, if he, they've given you the credit. So if in an event like that, if you're the first one to report it, you get the credit. Whether it's right, whether it's wrong, whether it's true, whether it's false, whether it's partly true, whether it's partly false, you are the source. And so we're so busy trying to be, to get that credit on something instead of, there's no investigative reporting anymore. It's all opinionated, and we've allowed that to happen in our news so much to where a lot of the stories are rushed because, like I said, you want to be the first one plastered up there instead of taking a little extra time and saying, hey, let's give it another hour or two. Yeah. Let's get the information.
Good news as opposed to quick news. Right. Yeah, that's so.
Or the right news.
Right, the right news. Yeah,
it's gonna be. I mean, that event wouldn't have been made any less tragic
if they would have waited until they had all the information.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you threw the world into a frenzy, not just the basketball world, not just, Black America. You threw the entire world into a loop when you reported that. And people were fishing anywhere and everywhere to get more information, and no one really had it because no one was there.
And
what if he wouldn't have even been in there?
Right. What are the kids that were in there? The families knew they were in there, and everybody's speculating what other people, like they're finding out through the news. Yeah.